Hello.
Hi, Malika.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good. You?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Thanks for letting me speak so late. My son was very good. He was asleep pretty much right on 8:30.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah,
Thank you for taking out the time from your really packed and hectic schedule
no problem.
to allow me to interview you.
No, that's fine.
So, like I shared with you, I am running a campaign to
Mhm.
empower, inspire, and encourage girls in science.
Mhm.
So that I call Energize, and basically I want to motivate middle and high school girls to pursue STEM and university. So
Cool.
that's sort of my aim.
That's great.
And I would like to ask you a few questions on your journey as a highly motivational and successful woman, um, on your views and your journey as to how you reach where you are
Sure, of
today.
course. Do you want to It's a little bit. I'm sat here on my sofa. Hopefully, this is all right. But if you
No, it's okay.
if you want to hit record, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I think
Let
that's
me
okay.
make sure. Yes, my phone's on silent. I'll put it down here. Good.
So I was hoping you could share some of your experiences as a highly successful woman and a bit about yourself and your current roles and responsibilities.
Sure. So my current role is I work for Vodafone in
Mhm.
our global enterprise division, which you know because I'm a colleague of your father's, and I work in a team called Sales and Commercial Operations. So basically, that is the team that includes the sales operations, which is responsible for tracking and also ultimately the commission, the reward for our salespeople,
Mhm.
but also it's where our commercial organization sits. So the people who manage the bids for our biggest contracts, and the bid that I sit in now is the bit that's responsible for pricing. So we are that function that's sort of responsible for harvesting value for the company, basically. So kind of
Mhm.
sitting in the middle of sales, product, delivery, finance.
Wow.
Um, and I've been in Vodafone. Let's see, I joined Vodafone in October 2012.
Mhm.
I actually joined not long after returning to work from my maternity leave with my
Mhm.
son. So
Oh.
probably slightly unusual changing
Mhm.
jobs when I did that, but that was because so prior to joining Vodafone, I worked in a startup. You
Mhm.
might have heard of a company called Virgin Galactic.
I think so.
Yes. So Richard Branson's space startup. So I
Mhm.
ran their finance function for
Mhm.
4 years before my son was born.
Mhm.
And that was a company that when I moved there in 2008, it had 12 employees. And by the
Mhm.
time I left, it had about 200,
Wow.
most of those in the US. So
Mhm.
fantastic development experience for me.
Mhm.
But as I said, most of it, the reason I wanted to move on was really two things. One, I think you find in a startup that whilst it's great experience, the opportunity to
Mhm.
grow and progress at a point gets limited, and I had
Mhm.
reached that point. But kind of secondly, on a more personal level, the role was increasingly based in the US. I was going to California for work probably every month. And
Oh.
with the birth of my son, that just wasn't a
Mhm.
lifestyle that I wanted, that my husband and I wanted. And
Mhm.
they wanted us to move, and we didn't want to.
Yeah.
It was time to make a move. But my background is pretty much entirely in finance, actually. I
Mhm.
moved, you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not British. So
Yeah.
I grew up near Nashville, Tennessee,
Mhm.
and I went to Vanderbilt
Mhm.
University, which is in Nashville.
Yeah.
I hate to disappoint you, I didn't actually study STEM for my major. I had a
Oh.
double major in economics and
Mhm.
classical studies,
Yeah.
but came to the UK with Lehman Brothers, the investment
Mhm.
bank.
Yeah.
I moved over on their analyst training program in investment
Mhm.
banking and worked for 5 years in mergers
Mhm.
and acquisitions before I moved out of that and over into Virgin and into sort of more of an industry role.
Mhm.
That's a bit about my background, basically.
Oh, that's great. It sounds like a lot that you've done, like
It's been
moved in
interesting, yeah.
different jobs.
My first boss, when I was an intern, actually. So
Mhm.
I came to the UK to do my junior year abroad,
Mhm.
and partly. So I spent my first semester of my junior year in Italy, in Rome, doing a classics program. And then I came to the UK to study at the University of Leeds. And I was doing a mix of things for a mix of my economics degree, but I also took linear algebra randomly while I was there, because it's the US system and you can play a bit more, I think, with a liberal arts degree. But my political science professor I had actually asked me what I was doing for my summer. And I said, I don't really know yet. And he just goes, well, my daughter works on Wall Street, and I think you'd really like that. Okay. And I was extremely fortunate, I have to say. So I was an intern in the summer of 2000, which was basically the height of the tech bubble. So fantastic opportunity to get into a field like that. And even more importantly, I think my first manager ended up becoming the first female CFO of Lehman Brothers.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yes, she was amazing. Her name was Erin Callan. She was the CFO shortly before the bankruptcy, and she's actually just published her own memoirs, which were pretty incredible to read. Yeah. So I think I was very lucky to have a really inspiring female role model at the very, very beginning of my career.
So what did you study? Like, you said you did a double majors, but what did you study in high school and university, college?
I started out, so in high school, if you had asked me, so how old are you now? 16. 16. Yeah. So if you'd asked me when I was 16 what I was going to be when I grew up, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to study molecular biology and learn about genetics and become a psychiatrist and find ways to use genetic therapy to cure mental illnesses, basically. And that was, and growing up where I had in Tennessee, frankly, everyone I knew who was smart became a doctor. So that was just what you did. I was a massive nerd. I was valedictorian of my high school, but that's in Tennessee. It's all relative. So I got to college, and I did a summer program at Vanderbilt. I was really lucky. My junior year of high school that summer, I spent a summer at Vanderbilt, and I took Introduction to Poetry and I think was it a political science and a psychology course. And I remember coming home and saying to my mom that some of my friends there were taking political science, and I said, I'm really interested. Like, I think this is something I'd be interested in doing. And Mom goes, what are you going to do with that? She's like, you're not going to become a lawyer, are you? No child of mine is going to become a lawyer. So I ended up starting, so when I started my freshman year of college, I originally thought I wanted to do an interdisciplinary degree called public policy, which is a lot like PPE in the UK. Yeah. But in high school, where I grew up, our Latin program, we had 2 Latin teachers who were married in our hometown, and they were just outstanding. I mean, they were really dedicated to their students. They had no children of their own, and they created national champions in Latin competitions. Wow. So living in a relatively small town in Middle Tennessee, that was your opportunity to do something exceptional. So I'd gotten really into that. Simply because that was the best teacher that was available. And a lot of us, what's really funny is a lot of my friends from high school who've all gone on to do like most of them are doctors actually, all had classics degrees. So I went and took my Latin course, and my Cicero professor, sophomore year of college, just caught me coming out of my final exam, and he said, how would you like to go and study in Europe? Wow. And I said, okay, what's the catch? And he said, you've got to have a major. You've got to major in it. I was going to minor. I was going to do public policy and a minor in classics. And I said, okay, fine. So I slimmed my public policy degree down to just economics and did the double major instead. Wow,
it's so interesting how you can do both in the US. That system is so good in,
suits
flexibility.
Yeah, it really suits people who are like me, who are reasonably good at most things, but not incredibly gifted in any one thing. My husband's English. He grew up in Hertfordshire. I think I'd been here about 5 years when we met, and he probably actually is more suited to it. So my husband studied modern languages at Oxford. He studied French and German, and he is so gifted when it comes to languages, but I had to teach him how to do long division. So, it just depends on the individual, but yeah, I thought my liberal arts degree was really good for me.
So as, like you mentioned a bit about your family and how in the time it wasn't really, if you are in Tennessee, you have to become a doctor if you're really smart. So it's just these, I guess, stereotypes in a way. But if you were to take up psychology, or if you were to become a doctor, how would you have felt in like as a woman doing that?
So my two best friends from high school, both of them, like I said, are surgeons. Actually, one is a surgical oncologist. She's worked at MD Anderson, one of the best hospitals for cancer in the whole world. She's incredibly talented. It's not like it's through design or anything, but she has no husband, no children. She's a year older than me, so she's 38. My friend Stacy is a gynecological surgeon at Johns Hopkins.
Oh.
She can do a hysterectomy through an incision about that big.
Wow.
She's incredible. So Stacy Stacy ended up getting into biomedical engineering.
Oh, wow.
And kind of found that with medicine, she likes to play with technology and robots, and so she got into non-invasive surgery, and is incredible. They're both amazing at what they do. But they're both a year older than me. No husband, no children, but incredibly cool women with inspiring careers.
So did they find it a bit difficult, since you've known them? Did they find it a bit difficult as a woman trying to?
I think I remember talking to Amanda about her when she was choosing her residency coming out of medical school. She did comment to me at the time, and I think Amanda's always been, so they came at it from two different points. Amanda, I remember saying to me, it's so strange, there are no women electing a surgical residency. And she was starting to notice that gradually she was moving into a pool where, in medical school there was a good balance, but as you moved into your specialty, she definitely saw a difference moving into surgery. And then Stacy, actually one of the reasons, so Stacy was the opposite of me. She's known she wanted to be what we call an OBGYN in the US.
Yeah.
She was like 5. And that's always been her dream. And she thought she wanted to be an obstetrician. She thought she wanted to deliver babies. And she found that for her going into that residency, she ended up finding that the lifestyle that goes with that just wasn't what she wanted. Like, she didn't want the crazy hours where you're there. Because for some reason, I don't know why, most babies seem to be born at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So it just wasn't what she wanted, and she ended up finding she had a gift for surgery instead, so she went down the gynecology route. But but I don't think she's ever. Whereas Amanda noticed it a lot going into hers. I think because Stacy was specializing in women's reproductive health, she's never commented on that to me, really. No.
So, seeing that you've been in several different jobs, did you face any trade-offs between work and life balance that is there?
I think on reflection, with hindsight, probably only in the limitations that I imposed on myself. I think that coming here and starting work in investment banking, I was very aware of, so put it this way, in my class of 300 going into investment banking, we had, from memory, 13 women.
Wow.
And most of us all came to Europe. It was really funny. All the American women ended up coming to Europe. Of our group of 30, half of us were women, and the American men were so angry. But I remember being very aware of it, and and I remember reading when I was about 22, 23, a book by a lady named Sylvia Ann Hewitt, who I love. That's called. It was published under different names because one's controversial, but the one I read was the controversial one. It's called Baby Hunger. And it talks about, she did lots of interviews with very successful women and asking about trade-offs. And I remember my flatmate at the time going, "Why are you reading this? Like, you're 23. I said, "Well, I know it's hard, and I don't have role models who have done this stuff because I just didn't grow up with them. So I'm kind of looking for advice, looking to see something that I think I could be." And I do think that I probably. So let's see. I left banking at 27. I left banking in the year I basically met my now husband, and to be honest, it was completely. Well, it wasn't completely. So there were things that I didn't find it personally fulfilling enough to be worth the sacrifices, but I was very, very conscious that I just didn't see how I could ever reconcile that sort of a job with having a family, and it was something that I absolutely wanted to do. So I think I'd always kind of told myself that I would get out, which in hindsight, I think I I might have jumped a little bit early, but then, whatever, I had really cool experiences, so it's fine. The only time I ever had anyone say anything to me about it was my very first performance review with my managing director. So I managed to come in and top of the class, and I was all, he gives me the performance rating, gives me the bonus, and I'm all excited. And I said, thank you. Where do you see this going for me? And he said, you'll do this until you're 30, and then you'll have kids and quit. And I looked at him and I said, well, to be honest, I won't make MD by the time I'm 30, so why would I work that hard if I'm not going to get the final prize? So I'm like, never mind, I'll leave. It really, and unfortunately, I think I took, he's a great man, I'm still in touch with him. He was a fantastic manager, but I think I took that comment too much to heart, and I didn't challenge it enough.
But I guess maybe that's some challenges that you faced in work, I guess, in a way.
It's just it's quite a powerful thing to be told when you're 22.
Wow.
And you don't know any differently.
I think the impression must have stayed with you for a while.
Oh, still does, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah,
I can't say I understand, but seeing that, I've heard from other women that it may have happened to them as well. It's just something, maybe in the corporate sector.
Yeah, but then, to be fair, it's not that he always promoted me, was great. Still, actually, we're in touch. His daughter is your age.
Oh.
And we were actually in touch a couple of months ago talking about summer internships. And ironically, he goes, hey, you had this job at Virgin Galactic. Do you know people there? That was incredible. Could you help my daughter get a job? Yeah.
So, over the span of your career, have you seen the role of women in the workplace change, or?
So I think, having only worked 15 years, on balance, I don't think so. I really don't. What I do sometimes observe is possibly a generational difference. Certainly if you compare my friends who are my peers with female colleagues who are, say, in their 50s, who were working during the 80s, I think sometimes you might see a bit of a difference. I think the good thing is, I like to think that my peers in age are kind of more comfortable in our own skin and more open to talk about, I had a manager who was in that older age bracket, and she actually said to me, so obviously I'm really active in our women's network, and she said to me, you need to be careful about doing too much of the women thing. I was like, it's kind of obvious I'm female, so what is that going to do? It was just fascinating me, because I'm used to, especially working in corporate finance where it's a younger environment, and there weren't many women, but the ones who were quite supportive of one another because we had to be. I was really surprised by that remark. But no, I think it just gets, as you get older, it just gets harder. But the reality is, it gets harder for men too. I'm sure your dad would tell you, he's probably had to make trade-offs in his career that he would have rather spent time with you and he didn't get to at different moments in time, and it's just no different.
Have you seen more women in the corporate sector or in investment banking as you've moved along?
I think that one's an obvious one. Let's see. So it's not as big of a difference as I might have expected it to be. So at our graduate level, it is 50-50, which obviously is a world away from what I experienced as a graduate.
Yeah.
And then when you get to my grade, so sort of middle management, it is about 30% right now across Vodafone, which obviously is fantastic relative to what banking, in banking I would have done well to have been at 10%. That'd probably be single digits. And then when you get to that, so it is still better. So even at our SLT level, from memory, it's low 20s. But that's in a company that's incredibly supportive of diversity. So, and I think Vodafone is fantastic, a fantastic place to work. One of the reasons I wanted to go there was it's a mobile phone company, so flexible working. You've got to be all about flexible working if you're a mobile phone company. And it was absolutely worth its weight in gold to me my first year back at work. So yeah, there's a difference, but not. It's not the. I think I probably had to. I had too extreme a view the other way. I think looking outside, looking in, I would have thought, oh, it's a corporate job. It's 9 to 5. Like, you know, from your dad, his job is not 9 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So what advice would you give young girls in a way as to if they're wanting to pursue STEM?
I do it because I'm a huge believer that, you know, I think just changes in the world. So there's a term that's used called VUCA. It's volatility, uncertainty, cloud, and analytics. And it's basically all about the rapid pace of change in the world. And technology is really key to dealing with that. And so, like, I think if I could have put it this way, I've already bought my son a Raspberry Pi and he's 4. So I would say, even if you're like me and you're passionate about Latin, like think about potentially trying to develop some coding skills or something like that, or just some technical skills, because that will always stand you in good stead. So I also think, for me, one of the things I was very conscious about early in my career, and I'm glad I did it, is I really wanted to invest in gathering hard skills, because factual knowledge and skills, analytical skills, are something no one can ever take away from you, and there's no perception, right? You can either do it or you can't. Whereas for me, something softer like sales, for example, it's easier to let bias creep in, because it's all about how you engage with other people. And I think as you get more senior, that's more important. But I think that foundation and hard skills, which STEM gives you, is a really, really valuable thing for a foundation for your career.
Do you have any advice for me on my campaign moving forward?
I think it's fantastic. I'd be curious to hear a bit about what inspired you to do it, because obviously you've got a world of different ways you could use your time, so it's great that you're doing this.
Because I was actually in an internship last summer. I was working at Cambridge with a professor, so I was in the lab of genetics working with her. So what I noticed around me was that although you see that there are women, there are not as many in comparison to men. And since science is something I'm really passionate about, I feel it just gives you a more structured and logical way of thinking and a rational way of looking at problems.
Yes.
So I felt that even in my school, because I'm in an all-girls school, looking at the girls around me, not very many of them want to pursue science later. So that kind of...
Oh, funny.
Yeah, they're more humanities-based, and because our school's an international school, I thought, well, if it's something that's pertinent here, it must be around everywhere around me. Definitely. And since I've noticed it around me in internships or in school, and looking at people around me and speaking to them as well, they just, I don't know, they might not know what options you have for careers after science. And because STEM gives you such a big opportunity, I was actually at Bank of England as well for an internship last summer, and I spoke to several women who were there, and they said, well, actually, I'm a physics graduate. I have done physics, and I'm here working at Bank of England. And I was really shocked to hear that they prefer people who actually have a STEM major more than economics, because you can do that. Economics is something you can learn on the job, and you learn a lot from your peers when you're working as well. So I found that really interesting.
I also think if you take economics, so one of my best friends from university is an economics professor, and I remember her telling me when she chose, so she did a double major in economics and math, and she went into management consulting for a bit. She worked at Bain in Boston, decided she wanted to leave and go into academia, and I remember her telling me doing her PhD, she's like, to be honest, I use the math more than the economics, because at a certain level, it's all about your ability to model. That's I'm just reflecting now, thinking, so of my best friends, I'm like, I've got the 2 doctors, I've got the one who's the economics professor, did economics and math. My friend Laura, who's a lawyer, studied chemistry. My friend Catherine, who was a banker, who's now a stay-at-home mother, studied math at Cambridge. I'm like, ooh, wow, I'm like the fluffy one who's got an arts degree.
No, but I find that really interesting, because math and economics is something I love, but I love science as well, which is why I love the US education. It's just ideal, because you can do both things, and which is what I hope to do later, maybe do biochemistry or biomedicine with economics as a double major. So it has both that aspect, because I don't quite know whether I want to become a doctor or do I want to go up and have my own startup maybe later.
Wow.
So like work for a startup in the economic side of it, but using my knowledge of biology and chemistry.
I've actually got a friend, Mo. So when I first moved to the UK, one of my male friends from university had gone to boarding school here, and so he ended up setting me up. My first boyfriend when I moved to the UK was his best friend from boarding school, and he was a doctor. He's now an anaesthetist, and one of his friends from his class at Imperial ended up, I think probably midway through being a junior doctor, he ended up going to business school, and he now does exactly that. So Mo works in biotech.
Yeah.
And he found that for him, so he ended up going to Stanford, and I think he still is in California.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think for him that was a change. I do find the one thing that did surprise me in the UK was how young you have to decide if you want to be a doctor.
Yes.
I think that's incredible pressure to put on someone.
Yeah.
So my friend Amanda, Amanda went into college studying classics. She didn't decide she wanted to go to medical school until her junior year of college, which was incredibly late. It was unusually late for the US, and she had to work really hard. I think she had to do some summer school to do it and catch up. But I can't imagine, given how talented she is at it now, and it's just she came to the realization sort of later, she was studying neuroscience and decided that she liked the science aspect of it. And I think it's a shame, the idea that, in a different system, that would have never been an opportunity really available to her, or it would have been much, much harder.
Yeah, I think that's one of not the limitations, I would say, but for people like me who don't quite know whether they want to do it, I would say that the US is a better option, because it gives you time to really explore your choices and see whether that's fit for you in a way. Yeah. Which is what I hope to do later.
As long as you're happy to go to university for twice as long and to spend about 10 times as much money.
Well, it would be the same for me in the UK as well, because I'm an international student, so...
I got you. Yeah, so there's no difference.
Yeah, so... Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking to me.
It's been my pleasure. So did your dad mention to you the program we're doing with Girls Talk?
Yes, he did.
So I will dig out. They did send me, so when we started the mentoring program, they sent me some stats. And interestingly, actually, I think they found that what you were saying about subjects girls study wasn't quite true. It was that they were finding that on average, it's not that we're shying away from STEM subjects, but it's specifically STEM careers.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, and it may differ by the school, who knows. But I'll see if I can pull that out. And then also I'll do it now. I'll get online and introduce you to Vanessa, who runs Girls Talk, and just see if she could do, it might be an uncomfortable one because obviously they get paid to organize these things. So if she doesn't want to do it, or if you find her unresponsive, because Vanessa's incredibly professional and responsive, but if she's not, let me know. And there's another route I would go. So there's a lady, another Vanessa Valelli, who runs an organization called We Are the City, and it is awesome. They run a thing called the Network of Networks, where basically leaders of women's networks from about 100 organizations, so pretty much the FTSE 100, get together for a quarterly meetup, share best practice, make connections, and it's been so much fun. You learn a ton, and Vanessa's just a really inspiring lady. She wrote a book called Heels of Steel about her career in the city.
Wow. What's the program called?
So the one that we have done, that we have worked on, is called Step Into STEM, and it's just a pilot program this year. It's only 20 girls, but it's sponsored by Vodafone, BT, Ericsson, and O2 as a cross-industry mentoring initiative. And we launched on International Women's Day, and we're finishing on Day of the Girl in October.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're about to do our work experience week, actually, in a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's nice. But the one that you mentioned with Network of Networks.
Oh, Vanessa, so that's... Network of Networks is for women's networks in different corporates and law firms, etc. around. But yeah, it's called We Are the City. Okay. Is the name of the organization. So I would try Girls Talk first because they're specifically linked into schools. But if you don't get traction, Vanessa
the only thing I really need is just to get in touch with some schools. Because I would like to do the presentations myself. It's just... Yes, you should. it's just getting in touch with the heads of the schools, but I know they're really busy. So even if it's not now, maybe in the beginning of term, if I can just go to schools and give some presentations, that would be really nice.
Yeah, and that would be interesting to check. So I'm trying to remember I'll have to look up our timelines for how we managed engagement, because let's see, we launched, I'll dig that out.
Mm-hmm.
I'll dig that out for how we ended up doing ours. But yeah, let me, I'll connect you to Girls Talk first, Vanessa at Girls Talk. And then let me know in a week's time if that works for you. If you don't get traction with her, and I'll try Vanessa Vallely instead.
Oh, thank you so much for everything. Thank you.
No, not a problem. Like I said, I think it's really fantastic that you're putting your time and your efforts into this.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.